In the last video, I completed the flexibly sewn full leather binding. I skimmed over the cover decoration, which is commonly known as the Cambridge panel style. In this video, I'll show enough details so that I hope you feel comfortable executing this design yourself. However, I think I could have done a better job at explaining the historical context of this binding. So I'm sure to revisit this binding in the future, maybe using the more appropriate calf instead of goat, and having done a lot more reading. I'm following the instructions by Nick Cowlishaw, which is available on the internet in the Autumn 2013 edition of Skin Deep. The steps in this work are: make a stencil, sprinkle the front and back of the book, blind tool back and front covers, blind tool across the spine, attach the spine label, which I'll skip, and dress the leather and polish it. Let's get started. The design is a series of nested rectangles or panels, with the outer panel and inner rectangle coloured by sprinkling. To achieve this, I'll make a stencil from 1mm binder's board. I cut a piece of board to the same size as the cover. Following Nick's recommendation, I then divide the width of the board by 11. And using dividers, I'll make 4 prick marks in from each side at the head and tail and from the head and tail. Then at the 2/11ths and 4/11ths marks, I'll lightly score lines across and up and down. Now I know where the panels are and I can cut them out. Before I do cut out the panels, I draw a couple of lines across the stencil so I can put it back together in its original configuration. This style of cover decoration was used for plain leather bindings from the late 17th century into the 19th century all over England, peaking in the first half of the 18th century. During this long time period, there was a lot of variation seen in historical examples, in the size of the panels, in the blind tooling, and in how the sprinkling was done. In fact, there is no evidence that Cambridge should get special credit for this decoration style, as it was widely used all over, with no evidence of it originating in Cambridge. And I could go on to repeat secondary sources about where this name has probably come from, but I'm going to continue my reading and save it for a future video, and I promise to add a nice red label in that future video. Since dye is going to be flying everywhere and the capping of the book block does not extend all the way to the spine, I'll cut a couple of pieces of cardstock to cover these exposed parts of the book edge and tape them into place. I'm going to use the Fiebing's spirit-based leather dyes for the sprinkling. My first attempts were with dark brown aniline dyes. Then Glenn Malkin recommended the spirit-based dyes, and I've found these easier to use. They don't have a noticeable effect on the water absorption of the leather, which could interfere with the blind tooling later. Traditionally, all sorts of methods were used to sprinkle the leather, including chemicals such as ferrous sulfate, also known as copperas. If you're interested in this last method, I'd recommend Terry Buckley's Standards of Excellence video and his accompanying notes. I start by sprinkling the outer rectangle. Traditionally, the outer rectangle is lighter than the inner panel. Glenn shared a photo of a very nice example of a book he did in this style, and he had not sprinkled the spine. Glenn said in his limited experience with historical examples that he thought it was about 50-50 whether the spine had been sprinkled. I'm going to sprinkle the spine. The trick with sprinkling is to not overload the brush with dye, to test before going to the book, and to not hold the brush directly over the leather. If you do hold the brush directly over the leather, a large drop of dye will certainly drip off, putting a large splotch on your book. You can always add more, but you can't take it away. So easy does it and gradually build up to the desired sprinkling. Use a nice heavy weight to keep the stencil flat to the cover so there's no underspray of the board. I'm using a toothbrush and a metal spatula to do the sprinkling. It's getting hard to find a simple toothbrush without chunks of plastic in them. I've found the overpriced eco toothbrushes work well. Instead of a spatula, the back of a knife can be used. Once the outer rectangle is done, let the dye dry and replace the outer piece of grey board, move the weights and remove the centre rectangle. To make the centre rectangle darker than the outer, I first use the brown dye and then finish with a light sprinkle of black dye. Here's a pro tip. Do a heap of practice boards until you've got a couple that you're happy with. Keep these boards and use them as a reference while doing the sprinkling. Try and match the level of sprinkling to your reference boards. Don't rely on your memory or you'll end up with the result that I have, with one of the centre panels being darker than the other. Once the first side is dry, flip the book and do the other board. I'm going to blind tool the design on the covers. Traditionally, blind tooling involves warm or hot tools and moist leather. The use of the warm tool on moist leather causes the leather to darken and makes the design pop. My first attempts were with cold tools on dry leather. Maybe this is the best way to start, but the overall design just doesn't have a lot of depth to it when the tooling doesn't stand out. I'm still learning about traditional blind tooling and techniques such as jiggering, which is done to polish the impressions, or building up to a final colour using multiple impressions of the tool. I'll leave going into details of blind tooling technique for the future. I start by making a light guideline with a sharp bone folder for the 3 rectangles. I make this line about 5mm in from the edge of the board and sight along the left edge of the creaser, putting this edge on the guideline. Once I've made the guidelines, I moisten the leather and run the heated creaser along these lines. I push the tool away from me and rotate the book to achieve this for all the lines. Even though I practiced this with the creaser all morning, I still ended up using it too hot and burnt the leather in some spots. These old creases are made of steel, and if you're used to using brass tools, it takes some time to get used to the fact that the steel holds a lot more heat. You don't have to look at many historical examples to know there's a lot of variation in the tooling of Cambridge panels. I'm going to do the 3 rectangles of double lines, one on the edge of the board and the other 2 on the inside of the unsprinkled panel. I'll do a diagonal line across the unsprinkled panel and put a center tool pointing diagonally outwards from the unsprinkled panel. I'll also run a decorative farthing wheel around the inside of the inside panel. Nick suggests running a dotted line around the inside of the unsprinkled panel, but I don't have a dotted roll. Nick uses an adjustable width double line leather creaser to make the double lines. He also suggests using a double line fillet. A fillet is a roll with a notch cut in it so you can make sharp ends to lines. The problem with the double line fillet is that making the short diagonal lines is difficult. In the period this decoration was done, I believe the use of leatherworking tools was not uncommon. I just happened to have an old fixed width double line creaser, so I decided to use this. These leather creases show up on the second-hand market regularly and are much cheaper than finishing tools. But many are extremely worn and dinged up, unfortunately. Nick also uses a piece of board as a guide on the long lines. I've tried this and find that I have a tendency to double lines when doing this, so I work by eye instead. I'm right-handed, so I hold the tools in my right hand. For the center tool, I hold it using the English style grip with my thumb on the top of the tool. I steady the tool while bringing it into position using my left hand thumb. If your thumbnail is long enough, you won't burn the tip of your thumb, or you can make a small leather cover for your thumb. Once I put the center tool in position, I rock it forwards, back and side to side. This makes a sharp, even impression. With the decorative farthing tool, I use strips of vellum to mitre the corners. To put the lines across the spine, I put the book into a finishing press. I wrapped the book in something to protect it, and a scrap of leather was the first thing that came to hand. I'm using a spine palette which I have on loan. A spine palette, as the name suggests, is a tool designed specifically for putting lines across the spines of books. They're about 3 inches long and can be straight or curved. I prefer the curved versions. For the end lines, I wrap a piece of vellum around the spine of the book as a guide. Otherwise, I use the edges of the bands as the guides. As usual, I sight along the left edge of the tool, and thus I tool the lines to the right of the bands. I do one side of the bands, then rotate the book to do the other side. I finished the cover decoration by giving the leather a coating of JHS Leather Dressing. I apply a thin coat of the dressing, let the dressing dry for a few hours, and then give the book a good buffing. This gives the book a beautiful shine and the decoration further depth. While I wouldn't consider this cover decoration style a beginner's project, it's certainly within the capabilities of someone that can produce the full leather binding that it will decorate. You can get away with a small number of finishing tools and a cheap stove, and you don't need all the equipment that goes with using gold leaf. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. As always, I really appreciate you hitting the big thumbs up button. If you're able and want to, you can support the making of more videos like this through Patreon or with a one-off contribution, and the details are in the description below. To find videos I've made on specific topics or other projects, the best place to go is the Daz Bookbinding video guide, and there is a link in the description below. And if you want to be notified of my future videos, please hit the subscribe button and select the notification bell. Until next time, cheerio.